Hello there, welcome to lesson number 5 in our series on creating pendants using FluidDesigner for 3D printing. Today's lesson we're going to show you how you can create a cross pendant. So if we start off FluidDesigner, we first of all need to go to Learning Projects, Jewellery Projects, Pendants, and we're looking for lesson number 05, so it's a cross pendant. I'm just going to switch on the screencast keys, so any key presses I make should be displayed here, and just to show you what the object is we're trying to create today. So it's a pendant with a connector at the top. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So let's proceed. First of all, we need to do add curve, and we're going to use curves galore. So add curve and curves galore, and that opens up this panel in the toolbox window. If the toolbox window is not open, you just press T on the keyboard, open and close it. So T for toolbox. If we just zoom in, if we go to view and zoom to selected, we'll see what the current shape of this object is. Now clearly it's not a cross shape, it's an I-beam. But what we need to do is we can stick with this type. It's a profile type of curve. There are other curves that you can create, flowers and stars and cogwheels. We want to stick with this profile shape. We're going to stick with type 1 because we can change that look to a T and a U shape. Okay, we're going to stick with type 1, and what we're going to do is we're going to change these variables here. So if we change this value, you can see what's happening. It's filling it in there. Okay, so perhaps if we go right to the center, no, maybe not. Let's try changing the other value. Okay, let's try pushing that out. Oh, no, that's good. Look, that's starting to replicate the cross at the bottom. Okay, so we could set these at particular values if we want. We could type that as say 5. And we could type that as say 1. Now, it's not exactly the same as the one at the bottom. It's quite a bit smaller at the moment, but you can see what we've done is we've set a profile shape which is this kind of cross shape. So that'll do for the moment. We'll leave that as it is. You can clearly play around until you get the exact shape that you want. We've got no thickness to this object now, so what we need to do is over in the properties window here, there is an icon, a curve icon, and if we click on that, we'll see there are some properties we can change for this curve data. And what we need to do is to give this some thickness now, and the way to do that is to extrude it. So when we extrude it to a value of 1 millimeter, what that's actually doing is it's applying a thickness here of 1 above the grid and 1 unit, 1 millimeter below the grid. That gives us a total height here of 2 millimeters now. In the help panel, it's telling me to set this extrude to 2 millimeters. So if I do that, that gives me a total height for this object of 4 millimeters. Okay. And so we're starting to form our solid cross shape here. The other thing we want to do is this edge at the moment is very sharp. So one of the things we can do is we can add a bevel. Now if I just click on here and change the bevel, that goes crazy. Yeah, you can see that this is the bevel. It sorts out the edges and puts a bevel edge on it. So instead of a sharp edge, we've got this angular edge. Now 1 millimeter is a bit too big for this object, so I'm going to follow the instructions in the help menu and type in 0.25 millimeters. Okay, so that's a much more sensible bevel. Now you can clearly set this to whatever value you want, and you can even have it at 0 if you really want. Okay, so there's the bevel applied. So we've got this object with some thickness and we've got a bevel. Now at the moment this object is a curve and we can't print curves. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to confirm the changes that we've made so far. We need to change this curve. Remember, we did add curve, curves galore when we started this. we need to change this curve into a mesh, and we can do that by going to Tools, Object Tools, and converting it to a mesh. Now if we look at the size of this object, it's actually pretty small. It's only, what, 5.5 millimeters by 4.5 millimeters by 2.5 millimeters. So we want to scale this up a little bit. As you can see, the object at the bottom, the finished object, is much larger. And we can scale in FluidDesigner. Whoops, just move the screen around. We can scale in FluidDesigner by pressing the S key on the keyboard. So S to scale, and I can drag the mouse. Yeah, or I can enter in a value. Now I'm going to enter in the value 10, so I'm going to make it 10 times bigger. Now notice the properties panel is open, and these vector values here, the resize vectors, have changed to the value of 10 that I've entered. And we're going to need to reset that. But before we reset it, I'm just going to change the thickness of this object. At the moment, the Z dimension is 45 millimeters. That's much thicker than I want for my cross. I'm going to change Z, according to the help instructions, to 10 millimeters. So if I click in Z here and type 10 millimeters, that will flatten it down, and that's much more like the finished object now. We've got these vector values to consider here. We've resized this and we've changed the Z value. So we need to reset the scale, and we do that in FluidDesigner by doing Control A and applying the scale. And this tick box tells me that the scale has now been set to 1. Now that's something you need to do if you're 3D printing. So there's our cross now. What we now need to do, the next thing we need to do, is to add on a connector. That's this item down at the bottom here. Now in FluidDesigner we've created some of these connectors for you, and if we just go to 3D templates connectors, we'll see that there are a range of connectors there. Now if you just drag and drop these objects onto the workspace, because they're Blender files, all this work will disappear. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to use a command called append. And what we're going to do is we're going to append, I think probably this one, the 5x5 by 3 connector, so this connector here, and we're going to add it to this workspace from the 3D templates folder. So what we need to do is to go to File and Append, just go up through the menu system, and it's 3D templates connectors. And we're going to add the 5x5 by 3, so that means it's got a 3 millimeter diameter hole in the center of it and a cross section of 5x5. And the object is what we're looking for, the object. We don't need to worry about brush and mesh, it's object you need to look for. So it's a connector 5x5 by 3, so we need to append that. And you can't see it well, you can just about see it at the bottom, it's there. Okay, FluidDesigner always puts objects in the center of the screen. So let's just at the moment it looks like the cross is selected, so let's, oh no it's not. Okay, so let's just move the connector across there. Okay, now on the other one it's on the other side, but not to worry, we can put it on this side here. So we want to put this connector on the end of the cross. Clearly it's at the wrong angle at the moment, but what we can do is we can just rotate it, and the axis we need to rotate it about, we want to rotate this end up, is the x-axis. So if we just go to rotation here, we'll just, oops, no, we've not got that selected, we've got the profile selected. No, I need to select this item here. I need to select the connector. I want to rotate the connector. So I want to rotate it about the x-axis. So let's just see which way to rotate it. Yeah, that's okay. And usually with these things you've got to rotate it 90 degrees or 180 degrees. So 90 degrees is what we need to rotate it. And what we now need to do is join it to the cross itself. So we need to just make sure that it just goes inside there. I mean, you can go in all the way if you want, just depends where you want your hole. Okay, so there looks like a reasonable place. Alright, now we've now got to confirm and properly join these two objects. Well, the first thing I'm going to do excuse me, is delete the object at the bottom. So highlight that and press X to delete. I'm now just going to double check the position of this before I join these two objects together. So if we go to view and front, okay, we're in perspective mode at the moment, so that looks a little bit strange. But if we switch from perspective to ortho, okay, now the front view is not helping me. Well, it is. It's showing me that this connector is in the middle of the object. So if I go view and left, it's in the middle of the object there. So I don't need to adjust this up or down or left or right. It looks to me as though it's in a pretty good position, and that's because everything's relative to the center here. Okay, so it is always worth checking the exact position of this connector and whether or not it's fitting right. So what we want to do now is to combine these two objects together, and we do that by using a mathematical function called a Boolean modifier. So highlight the main body itself, the cross itself. We then need to go to the modifiers icon, and we're going to add a modifier, and the modifier we're going to add is a Boolean modifier. And what we want to do is to create a union, combine two meshes in an additive way, a union between the cross and the connector. And if we just switch to wireframe mode and just zoom in at this point here, what we want to do is we want to effectively delete those internal faces there, those grey areas. By using this Boolean operation, we're mathematically going to join the cross to just this part of the connector. This part inside the grey bit should get deleted when we apply this Boolean operator. So I'll just switch back to material mode. And so to apply the Boolean, we need to go to Tools, Object Tools, and to convert it to a mesh. Okay, now we still haven't quite finished here, because whenever we do this, we always get a duplicate of one of the objects. So you always need to remember to move the object out of the way. And if we click on this connector now, and then press X on the keyboard, we can delete it. And so here is our cross, and if I just go back into wireframe mode again and just zoom in here, oops, need to move that window out of the way. If I just zoom in here, you can see there's no internal faces now, there's no grey bits. The grey bits have been deleted by the system when we perform that Boolean operation. So there's our finished cross with the connector on the top now, so we need to save it and also double check it in Netfabb Basic. So go to File and Save As, and go up through the menu system. We're doing pendants, so it's My Projects, Jewellery Projects, Pendants. It's lesson 05, it's the cross pendant, so you save that as a Blender file. We now need to export that as a wavefront object. And I like to export it to the desktop as an OBJ file, because we need to check this in Netfabb Basic. And if we go to Project and Open and go to the desktop, we can open 05, the cross pendant. And yeah, there are some problems. You can see some red highlighted there. We've got this warning red triangle, but I'm confident. If we go to Extras and repair the part, you can see all these yellow lines around. Okay, so there are some border edge issues here because of the bevel and the way that FluidDesigner works. So if we just move that across and select Update, so there are a few 189 border edge problems, 9 holes, there are 5 shells, but let's run automatic repair and execute it, and then click Update, and as you can see, Netfabb's done its job. It's deleted all of those problems, sorted them all out. We've still got the object. Okay, so what we need to do is apply the repair and remove the old part. So everything's looking okay at the moment. We'll just wait and see. If we go to part, oh yeah, the warning red triangle's gone, so that's a good sign. So if we go to part and export the part as a wavefront object, export it to the desktop as a cross pendant repaired. Oh yeah, we have come across this before. There is still a couple of issues with this mesh, but Netfabb will still have another go at trying to repair this, and there are some manifold edges. So if we click optimize here, optimize button, yep, it's fixed it again. I don't know quite why it does it in 2 stages, but it does. So the green tick says that's okay. It's corrected some more problems with the mesh, so you can now export it, and that file is now in a printable file format for our cross pendant. So that's it. That's the end of this lesson. Thank you.